Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm MTG Helix and today we're going to be starting our second episode of Tribal Talk. Today we are going to be talking about Merfolk. So starting out the list we have Curse Catcher, which is a powerful one drop because it allows us to counter spells early in the game or disrupt our opponent's mana curves. Moving on, we have Tide Shaper. And this is a very powerful card in this deck, and I'll explain why here. So we have Kicker, and when this, we'll almost always want to kick this spell, and the reason is because we're able to make an opponent have an island. Now, why is this powerful? Well, Tide Shaper gets +1/+1. That's one reason. That's reason enough on its own for it to have the ability. However, we have two cards in our deck that are our lords, our two main lords. We have Lord of Atlantis, and we have Master of the Pearl Trident, which give other merfolk +1/+1 and Island Walk. That means that we can use Tide Shaper to make that Island Walk ability happen and make all of our creatures unblockable as long as we have Lord of Atlantis or Master of the Pearl Trident on the board, which is amazing. Super powerful. We also have another card in the deck that gives our opponent islands. We have Spreading Seas, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card. So it's not only just making a land an island, but it's giving us card draw as well. And the other advantage to making their lands islands is that now their lands can't tap for their colors anymore. Now their lands tap for blue. So assuming they're not running blue in the deck, that's just another great way to disrupt their game plan. Now moving right along, we've talked about Lord of Atlantis and Master of the Pearl Trident. We're going to move on to Merfolk Trickster. Now Merfolk Trickster is an incredibly powerful card that has so much interaction with your opponent's deck because it allows us to get rid of creature abilities. And creature abilities are super, super powerful. So if we can tap those down and take care of those for a turn, and then have potentially ways to bring that back, or ways to like not only tap down blockers but tap down abilities, that makes this card super, super powerful. And what's great is that it's another merfolk. So it's going to get pumped up by our lords. It's going to have Island Walk. It's another creature. And it has Flash. So we can do it on our opponent's turn. Incredibly powerful. One of the most powerful ways to counter or stop, at least temporarily, an enemy's game plan. Now moving on, we have Silvergill Adept, which is just another great way to draw cards. And it's another merfolk. As an additional cost, you do have to play you do have to reveal a merfolk, however. Now, Glasspool Mimic slash Glasspool Shore is one, a blue source, but it is also a way to copy our lords or other things and basically um, keep powering up our merfolk. And or we could potentially copy other abilities. And that is just very, very powerful. Glasspool Mimic is a powerful card. Marrow Regery is another card that bumps up our merfolk in power. However, instead of giving them Island Walk, it allows us to tap or untap permanents. This can be used to tap down enemies' land, enemies' creatures, untap our own land or creatures or artifacts, enchantments potentially, although this list does not run any. But it is just so powerful to deal, or except for Spreading Seas, but that doesn't have an ability that makes it tap. But it's just an incredibly powerful card because we're gonna have Merfolk ETBing because of that's how we win the game. We win the game by fighting our opponent with creatures. Now, Svaelun of Sea and Sky is indestructible as long as you control at least two other merfolk, which in a lot of matchups should be pretty easy. We should be getting our merfolk out there. If we're not doing that, we're being disrupted somehow, which is not great. It's a source of card draw, and it gives other merfolk Ward 1, which is a great way to disrupt decks that rely heavily on targeting creatures, or even just disrupt your opponent's removal in general. Now moving on, we have Force of Negation, which is an incredibly powerful blue counter spell Though it only counters non-creature spells, we have other ways of dealing with those creatures. So, Force of Negation, very powerful card. And because we don't have to pay its mana cost. Aether Vial. Aether Vial is going to be one of those tribal staples because we have, as tribal decks, very generally low cost cards, 1 drops, 2 drops, etc., that we can play with Aether Vial. Now, a couple great things about Aether Vial. We can bring things into the battlefield on our opponent's turn. We can put creatures on the battlefield without casting them. And overall, we can get more stuff out because it frees up our land, which is great. Now we're going to talk about, and we'll talk about how this works with Chalice of the Void in a moment here. Now we're going to talk about Cavern of Souls. Cavern of Souls is just another one of those tribal staples. We can choose a creature. Obviously, in a Merfolk tribal deck, we're going to choose Merfolk, and it allows our spells not to be countered, which is incredibly powerful. But also, it allows us to bring in any color. So obviously, we're going to be using this for blue. Additionally, it's a blue source without it being an island, which can help if you ever encounter a mirror match. That's a thing we'll see in some of the other lands as well. Fiery Islet is another way to get blue mana, and it's a card draw, as well as Waterlogged Grove. Fiery Islet and Waterlogged Grove are effectively the same, except blue-green and blue-red. We have islands. We have Mutavault, which is powerful because not only is it a land, but it allows us to make a 2/2 creature that's all creature types, which means it's going to get pumped up by those lords and other things like that. And it also counts if you need to make Svaelun indestructible. It's a way to do that because it's a Merfolk. So if you only have one Merfolk and the Svaelun's getting targeted by something, you can make Mutavault a Merfolk and make Svaelun indestructible. World Palace in the Clouds is another blue land. It allows us to bounce it to our hand, and Waterlogged Grove we've already talked about. So, moving on to the sideboard. Chalice of the Void. Great card to deal with all those lower cost decks, like decks with lower CMC. One with a lot of 1 drops, 2 drops, etc. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, wouldn't Chalice of the Void counter my own spells, and wouldn't that be counterintuitive? Well, we have cards like Aether Vial, which allow us to put creature cards onto the battlefield without casting them. And we have Cavern of Souls, which allows us to play our tribal cards without them being countered, which is just a great, great way to deal with Chalice of the Void. And that can be very powerful. That can win you a lot of games. This spell allows us to target instants, so another way to deal with removal. Grafdigger's Cage is a way to deal with things like searching library abilities and Graveyard Hate. Relic of Progenitus is also Graveyard Hate. Counterspell allows us to deal with, big creature spells that might be cast, but that's not a general purpose. Usually we'll use it to deal with like control decks and things like that. Harkley's Recall is Artifact Hate. It allows us to bounce artifacts. Merfolk Trickster, we've already talked about. In heavier creature matches, we might bring that in. And Tidebinder Mage is a way to tap down red or green creatures. So this is the Merfolk Tribal deck. I want to thank you all for coming back to my channel. I know it's been a couple weeks since I've last posted, and I'm glad to be back. So thank you very much. Have a great day.